The night everything fell apart began in a lakeside restaurant in Asheville, North Carolina, where my husband, Ethan, had invited his family to celebrate his mother's birthday, and I remember thinking how strangely tense the room felt even before dinner arrived. His younger sister, Vanessa, kept watching me across the table with a smile that looked polite from a distance, but carried something colder underneath, as if she had already decided how the evening would end. I was 38, a successful architectural consultant who had purchased my townhouse in Charleston before Ethan and I ever met, and after 7 years together, I had learned that keeping quiet around his family was often easier than explaining why their behavior hurt me. But that night, I finally realized my silence had been protecting the wrong people. Vanessa had always been the favorite, and Ethan treated every problem she created as though it were his responsibility to solve. From unpaid debts and broken promises to arguments with relatives who had finally grown tired of being manipulated. I had tried for years to maintain peace, but 3 months earlier, I discovered something that made every previous argument suddenly look insignificant when an old envelope accidentally delivered to our house contained copies of financial documents connecting Vanessa to a secret account used by her husband, Ryan, for his construction company. What disturbed me most wasn't simply the money involved, but the dates and handwritten notes showing that several large transfers had been approved using Ryan's electronic signature while he was supposedly out of the country. And when I quietly investigated further, I discovered that Vanessa had been working with someone inside the company to hide the missing funds. I didn't immediately confront her because I knew exactly what Ethan would do, since whenever anyone questioned Vanessa, he became her defender before he even heard the evidence. So instead, I contacted a lawyer I trusted and preserved the documents without altering them, while also keeping a detailed record of every suspicious transaction. Then another piece of the puzzle appeared when I discovered that Vanessa wasn't acting alone, because the person helping her was Ethan's uncle Marcus, the same man who had spent years lecturing everyone about honesty while quietly receiving payments from a consulting company that did almost no actual work. For the first time, I understood why Vanessa had always seemed so confident, because she wasn't merely protected by Ethan's loyalty. She was surrounded by relatives who had reasons of their own to keep the family's secrets buried, and I decided that if they wanted a confrontation, I would make sure the truth arrived before their excuses did. 2 weeks later, Ethan's mother hosted another family gathering at my townhouse, and Vanessa arrived nearly an hour early with a dramatic story about how I had supposedly insulted her during a private conversation. I immediately recognized the strategy because she had used it before, but this time Ethan entered the kitchen furious, pointed toward the front door, and said, "You have embarrassed my sister for the last time, so either apologize to her in front of everyone or get out of this house." I looked at him for several seconds because those words revealed something far more painful than anger, as he genuinely believed he had the authority to throw me out of a property I had purchased years before our marriage. And instead of arguing, I calmly placed my glass on the counter and asked everyone to sit down. Vanessa folded her arms and smiled as though she had finally won, but I opened my laptop and connected it to the television in the living room, telling them that since everyone was already gathered, perhaps we should stop discussing rumors and start discussing facts. The first document displayed was a bank statement showing a series of transfers from Ryan's company into an account controlled by Vanessa, followed by security logs proving that several transactions occurred while Ryan was overseas, and then I displayed the messages between Vanessa and Marcus discussing how they planned to replace the missing money before anyone noticed. Ethan's expression changed instantly, while Vanessa stopped smiling and whispered, "Where did you get those?" And I answered, "From the same place you got the courage to lie to everyone for so long, the belief that nobody would ever check." Ryan demanded to know what was happening, and within seconds the room erupted as he recognized account numbers that had been hidden from him, while Marcus attempted to dismiss the documents as misunderstandings, until I displayed the signed correspondence linking him directly to the consulting payments. Vanessa began blaming Marcus. Marcus blamed Vanessa, and Ethan stood in the middle of the room realizing that the sister he had defended for years had been using his loyalty as a shield. Then Ryan asked me the question nobody else had thought to ask. Why did you keep this from us? And I looked directly at him before saying, because every time I tried to tell Ethan that something was wrong, he told me protecting family mattered more than being right. That sentence finally broke Ethan's certainty, because for the first time he understood that his constant defense of Vanessa had not protected his family at all. It had simply given her more time to continue deceiving everyone around her. Ryan immediately called his attorney. Marcus left the house before anyone could stop him, and Vanessa began crying as she realized that the evidence could not be explained away as jealousy or a family disagreement. Ethan then turned toward me and quietly asked, "Is this why you've been distant?" And I told him, "No, Ethan, I became distant because every time I needed a husband, you chose to be your sister's defender, and tonight I finally stopped pretending that wasn't destroying us." After everyone left, Ethan followed me into the kitchen and tried to apologize, but I had already placed a folder on the counter containing our separation documents and a formal notice explaining that he had no ownership claim over my townhouse. He stared at the papers and said, "You're really ending our marriage over this?" And I replied, "I'm ending it because this wasn't one mistake. It was 7 years of choosing everyone else's comfort over my dignity." He stood there in silence as I reminded him that the house, the mortgage history, and every major asset connected to the property were documented in my name. And for the first time since our wedding, there was nothing he could threaten me with because I had finally stopped being afraid of losing someone who had already stopped standing beside me. The months that followed were messy, but the truth eventually reached every corner of the family. As Ryan's attorneys uncovered additional financial irregularities, Marcus was forced to answer difficult questions about the consulting payments, and Vanessa's carefully maintained image collapsed when relatives realized how many stories she had manipulated over the years. Ethan moved into a small apartment across town, and although he apologized repeatedly, I understood that forgiveness did not require me to rebuild a marriage that had become unhealthy. Meanwhile, I stayed in my townhouse, renovated the neglected study into a bright home office, returned to traveling for work, and slowly rediscovered the peaceful version of myself I had forgotten existed. A year later, I stood on the balcony of that same house during a quiet summer evening and realized that the biggest lesson hadn't been about money, betrayal, or even divorce, because the real lesson was understanding that peace is not the same thing as silence, and loyalty should never require you to ignore obvious wrongdoing. Ethan eventually admitted that his greatest mistake wasn't trusting Vanessa, but assuming that loving his family meant protecting them from consequences, while I learned that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't shouting or revenge, but calmly refusing to participate in the lie. If I had apologized that night just to keep everyone comfortable, the secrets would probably have remained buried. But by choosing the truth, I lost a marriage and gained something far more valuable: the freedom to live without constantly defending my right to be respected. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.